on Liberia. From Cape Mount to Cape Palmas, mountain back to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Pocondre, to educate, elevate, and promote. Yeah, focus on Liberia. For Liberia, Liberia. For Liberia, yeah, 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 yeah. From Monday to Sunday. From Monday to Sunday. It's focused on Liberia. Talk about home affairs. Hey. In diaspora. Foreign affairs. Reliable information. History. Ooh. Talking about culture. Politics. Education. Entertainment. Business. Sports. Advertisement. Articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. From Monday to Sunday. Focus on.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Focus on Liberia Live on FOL TV and Kear Radio 95.9. My name is Dennis Jar, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In this edition of Focus on Liberia on Kear Radio, we're going to be discussing raising our national budget, our annual budget, to $1 billion. Yes, you heard me. That's $1 billion budget. We've been around, 6 to 800. Now, how do we raise the budget up to $1 billion? Many people have talked about this, but probably nobody actually showed you the way. It has been a kind of aspirations, but now we want to concretize it so that you can see where we are going. With me to discuss this, I have the host of the Hour of Politics, Mr. Anthony Kear, who is a political Buddha. Welcome, Mr. Kear.
Dennis, thank you. It's good to be here. Very good topic. Very, very good enough because our nation survives on, tax revenue. And we have so many needs in terms of national development. We need to be able to raise significant amount of money for the kind of development we need. Ivory Coast is about 24 billion. That is US dollars. Ghana is about 25. Sierra Leone is 1.2. I don't know Guinea's budget. Maybe Tom can help us. So we need to get somewhere if we want to really undertake the development projects that we need. So I'm happy to be here to ask all the necessary questions.
Thank you. Let me bring in James T. Wakui at Kear Radio 95.9. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you so kindly, and I'd like to say good evening to our other panelists on the program this evening, and to our listeners via the radio and online. I'd like to say good evening to you. I look forward to a wonderful, wonderful talking show tonight.
Thank you. We're also glad to have our subject matter expert, as a FOL resident economist. He is going to lead the way. And you see the dollar sign behind him, Thomas B. Cannon. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dennis. It's good to be here to join you guys to discuss about money issue. They always say money matters. So it's good. I mean, what we'll be discussing will be just looking at pointers as to what we can do. I know there's a lot being done on the ground, but this is a topical issue that we need to be discussing until we can get to that milestone. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And that means we can get there. Dr. King said, I may not get there with you, but one day we can get there. But I can even put a drastic timeline on this, on how to raise $1 billion. But let me start by saying, first, welcoming all our viewers from across the globe. Mr. C, how does $1 billion look to you? Sometimes we have seen $1,000, we handle something, we see 800 million. What does $1 billion mean to you? How does it look like?
Well, $1 billion is a huge amount of money for an individual or maybe a few individuals. But if you're looking at $1 billion for a country, it's very small. More so, a country with so much needs like Liberia, $1 billion is also very small. I can tell you that I think we need $1 billion in each of our major sectors for us to have a paradigm shift and leap in terms of national development. Then I'm a bold thinking person. I think our leaders, they say they're speaking to the realities, but big things are reality also. Bold thinking is reality also. They put somebody on the moon. Think about that. You see the plane flying in the air. Think about that. Then to raise money. So to conclude, $1 billion is a good chunk of money for individuals, but not for a country.
James Wakwe, I don't know. Have you heard anybody in Liberia, whether online in the radio station at rally, talk about raising $1 billion for Liberia, like taking the budget up to $1 billion? Have you heard that? And have you also heard how we can do it?
I've heard that from the political leader of the Alternative National Congress, that during the campaign in 2023, that if he wins the election, he will work to ensure that Liberia's budget, reaches what now won't be $1 billion, and he lists out rather some of the ways in which we can achieve that milestone for our country financial system, and that is through revenue generation, through improved tax system, and through honest transparency and accountability and other things that he listed, that he thinks will help Liberia put the country on the right trajectory and ensure that Liberians benefit from their resources. So yes, I've heard about it, and that was from the political leader of the Alternative National Congress.
Even though they didn't vote for him, but did Liberians buy that, or were they dismissive, or did they say, where the man coming from? How was that information received in your recollection?
I think the problem with Mr. Cummings is not about his policies or his ideas. It has just been about he's just coming in. In fact, 2023 it changed to the fact that he did not go as running mate to the then former vice president, and who is now the president of the country, President Jose Imam Paka. So many people did not really have problem with his ideas, and the only thing that they thought that he should have gone as vice president to the current president.
Did they see the raising $1 billion as realistic?
A lot of people saw that as realistic, and some other people also question whether it's just another political statement, especially during the time of campaign, where you have politicians making statements and promises to people. Well, I'm sure that a lot of people believe that, especially people like you, for example, who are that kind of level-minded and reasoning. They thought that it was time that Liberia moved from just the 800 and some more dollars million thing for the budget, but we should increase our budget, our envelope, so that resources can be expanded to other areas and that we can see financial transparency.
Thank you, Tom. I'm coming to you. My first question is, what I want to start very basic. When you talk about the budget, what does the budget do? So that we'll see, first have an idea. If somebody says our budget is 800 million, we want to raise it to 1 billion. My grandma at the alert market will say, what is this budget thing? So what does a budget do when it comes to, running a country or running a government?
Thank you, Dennis. So a budget is a tool that we use in public finance to be able to run an institution, to run a country, to run a business. So I normally hear people say that beyond the constitution, the budget is the most important piece of instrument, or is the second most important legislation. So the budget is a piece of document that highlights the priorities that we want to solve as a country in a particular year. This is why the budget has a time frame. In economic, we call it a fiscal year. So every time we pass a budget, it runs from a particular point in time and then it ends at another point in time. So before 2022, Liberia fiscal year used to run from July 1 to June 30th. So that was our fiscal year. That means when we pass the budget, we will implement it within that year. In 2023, because we wanted to align with the ECOWAS region, because we are all in this region in ECOWAS, and we wanted to make sure that all of the 16 countries at that time, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, this crisis had not started. So we wanted to make sure that we are aligned with the region so that when you are doing financial transaction, I mean, the other person can be halfway in their budget year and you are starting. So we join the rest of the region. So now our fiscal year starts from January 1 to December 31st. So that transition led to an amendment in the public financial management law. Now the budget has to go to the legislature, I think by the 30th of October, so that they have November and December to be able to pass it. But to basically answer your question, the budget is that piece of document that we put together as a country that lays out all of what we want to solve in that year. And then we attach money to it. So if you look through the budget, you will see money there for salaries. That means everybody that is working for the government within that year, how do they get paid? There are lines in the budget for salaries. How do they go to work? There are lines in the budget maybe for us to buy buses for them. When they get to the office, how do they do their work? They need computers. Then we put money in the budget for computers. We put money in the budget for them to buy fuel. There's money for scratch card. If they have to go to meeting to Accra or to go to the UN General Assembly, we put money in the budget for that. So the budget is that piece of document that encapsulates all of the priorities that year. If we want to build roads, how many kilometers do we want to build? Then we put money in the budget for that. If we want LWSC to deliver on water or to extend the pipe to other places, we have to put money in the budget for it. So that's how it is done. So there are some resources that are on budget. That means they are in the budget itself. There are some other resources that are off budget. So like the ones our development partners can give to us. On budget means it is controlled by the government within our public financial management system. Off budget is maybe it comes directly from the donor partner. It is used in the country, but we don't record it in our budget and we don't report on it the way we report on the other piece. So in summary, a budget is just a piece of paper. I hear current Minister Gafonke normally say it's a conglomeration of papers that tells you exactly this is how much money we have and this is what we want to spend it. But before I conclude, let me say that the budget it's not often the case that when the budget comes on, it says that the budget this year is 800 million, or even when we get to the $1 billion number, that means that money is already there because the budget is made from projections. The way it is made is that you first project the revenue, looking at how much revenue you collected last year, what you think is going to change in the economy this year, and then you come up with an amount and say we project that this is going to be our revenue envelope this year. And then it is that envelope now that you can take and share among all of the 109 spending entities that we have, even if we are going to pay a contribution to AU and other places. So I just wanted to stress this point that it's based on projections. We might, at the end of the year, you might realize it, or at the end of the year, you will not realize it based on changes that take place in the economy.
Thank you. Today, our discussion will be, so how do we raise this $1 billion, and is it a realistic amount? And if we'll raise it, how long will it take us? 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 years? So don't be thinking about that. Let me ask my the political bulldog, Anthony. Anthony, if the budget is this important, just as Thomas, why aren't we start with it in the morning and end with it at night? Why is it that we are treating it as a side topic? Maybe we talk about budget only during the budget passage time. After that, you never hear about budget again. We don't even care about it. We go on our political, religious, and merit-making journey. Why is that?
Well, the reason is the budget work is the government responsibility. And there is a government agency in particular that works with the first branch of government, the legislature, to do the work of the budget. And so, our system is set up in a way that they will be able to do the budget work. And when it is the Ministry of Finance, I think there's the Budget Bureau they used to have before. Tom can speak to that clearly. I know we used to have a Budget Bureau. I don't know whether it's part of Ministry of Finance now. And so they will do the budget, and then they will send it to the legislature to look at it. The legislature can make changes. Usually it starts from the lower house, and then it goes to the Senate. And then once they have an agreement based on the allotment, the appropriation, and then it was sent to the president will look at it and sign it, then it becomes, like Tom said, the instrument that we'll use, to fund the government. But what I also want to say, then I think your question is, why is it that the instrument, like Tom said, it is the most important legislation, in addition to the Constitution? And so if it is this important, because we always hear, well, you're violating the Constitution, how many times do we hear people, you're violating the budget law? How many times do we hear, well, you're not making the budget report? I know that there should be a periodic report on the budget. I think they do it by quarter. By the quarter, they should give a report how we're doing. That way they can make the necessary adjustment. We don't hear much. And I am also of the opinion that the opposition political parties that played an important role, they should also, really devote more time to the budget in terms of holding the government accountable and even educating the citizens, even their members, because this is a fundamental legislation. This is a fundamental document. It is like the blood of the country in terms of running the country, because when the budget dry out, when no money, we're done. And so I'm glad that you asked the question. We need to really get more education on the budget. In fact, I think the lawmakers should be able to have conversation about with their constituents about the budget. What is in there? They should provide the education. What's in there for them? But I don't think that much is being done on that front. And so at the end of the day, those who are charged with the working of the budget, especially the legislation and finance ministry, some ministers or agencies don't even know what they have in the budget. And even some of them who know, if they don't get it, they don't make noise about it. They acquire about it, or tell them, say, well, we didn't raise all the money. And so, there must be significant time devoted to us discussing the budget, and I think it will help.
And James, the same question. When you are living with your parents, right? The budget and the expenditure of the house doesn't really concern you. Is it because we are reliant on donors? That's why we don't pay much, which is like living with your parents. That's why there's not much emphasis on the budget, because since the war, the NGO mentality that somebody is going to give us something free. So the emphasis on IMF, World Bank, and all these different our partners, our implementing partners, and all the, is it because we feel like, you know, Father Christmas is somewhere to help us? That's why most of us, we don't concern ourselves with the budget.
I don't want to think that it's because of that. What I think is one of the problems is that we that not many people are educated about the budget processes, and not many people do follow up or read the budget. Because, for example, you have that document that is over 200 pages, 300 pages, right? And people feel too tired and reluctant to read through the different pages and looking at the different government ministries and agencies and looking at how much was allotted to them. And besides that, the media too has not really placed much emphasis on that, except when the budget is submitted. That's when you hear about the budget. And then when it is passed, that's when you hear about the budget. But except for few institutions that I know of, but a lot of media institutions do not place much education or emphasis on the different components of the budget and the process that follows. So because of that, I think Liberians do not have interest in that. The only thing they want to hear is, for example, if this ministry is supposed to receive 50 million and then they did not receive it, but then the money was misused, that's the time you hear about the noise, about the arguments, the debate, and things. But how the budget is spent, how it is used, and the process that comes along, people do not really care about that. So I think that's the problem. It's not really about whether the government is receiving much donor funds or the government is only paying attention to the donor funds. The government also too has not done well in educating people about the budget. Because I remember they had the open budget initiative for Liberians where you will have access to the budget. Sometimes it takes time before the budget is published on the website for people to go and read. So I think that if we improve on in these areas, right, we will have more Liberians reading and paying attention to the budget than just coming to listen to, oh, it was submitted, oh, it was passed, and this thing happened, this person did not pay, and this entity did not receive money. People are owing salary and a whole lot of things. So if we invest into education, then imagine some Liberians do not even know the difference between the donor fund or grants and the taxes that then the country raised to support the budget. We do not know the difference between that. We do not know how much we generate in total for our domestic revenue and also funds that come in. So these things need to be educated up. I mean, brought to the public so that people can understand that these are the different terms and these are things they mean. Like that, when you have these ideas, you follow the budget and you want to know what is in there for you, for your district, and for your county. But in the absence of that, I think we'll just have the same old thing happening.
Thank you. Now, Tom, we come to you. I think, and James, to your point, I think the people who benefit most from the budget, or who benefits from our ignorance of the budget, I don't think they have the incentives to educate us on the budget. So what do we do as a people? Because if I don't know about the budget, they can do it any kind of way. I won't talk. So I think it benefits them. And so if we're willing for them to provide education, maybe we have a little more time to wait. Tom, I want us to start with, I will be quiet. All three of us will be asking you questions, but our goal here is to see how do we do this $1 billion raise the budget? How long will it take? And is it even a realistic thing to talk about? Will it change anything if our budget go from where it is now to $1 billion? So you can begin from anywhere, and then we'll ask you questions.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. Before I get to that, the issue of the figure, I just wanted to, Anthony mentioned the issue of conversation with constituents, and James was also mentioning the issue of the open budget initiative. These are critical points that They both of them were raising, right? So in public finance, there's something we call participatory budgeting. This is something that started in Brazil in around 1987, but it mostly started with local governments. And participatory budgeting is an initiative in the budgeting process where you sit with the beneficiaries or you sit with citizens and ask them what their priorities are before you can budget on their behalf. So, for instance, you will go to Bon County, you go to Banga, and then sit with the people in Banga. Next year, we are going to develop a budget. What do you want us to focus on? Then they say, for us, our priority is we want additional primary schools, and so you budget for it. So this is something that is a bit lacking in our budgeting process. I think the Ministry of Finance started to do it, uh, but it's not really operationalized. In many instances, the budget is developed only among the institutions that are in Monrovia. Even those institutions that are decentralized in the counties, in some instances, they don't consult with those at the county level to say, what do you think your priorities are this year? So that it feeds into the development of the budget. And the International Budget Partnership does an assessment on this, I think on three key areas that they assess the budget processes in the different countries. They look at participation of citizens, they look at transparency, that is, how do you put the budget information out? Are you publishing the budget within the required time? Because all of these things are laid out in law. And our budget process is actually guided by the Public Financial Management Law that we passed in 2009. And then it got amended in 2019. So it is that law that guides the whole process of how you develop a budget, how you send it to the legislature, how it gets approved, and all of that. But our law really doesn't have much on citizens' participation. So there's a gap and there's a limitation in that law that we need to fix. Right across the border in Sierra Leone, for instance, they have specific provision on citizens' participation. They have consultations with, they call it bilateral consultation, even with civil society. So, for instance, when they are developing a budget and the land authority is developing its budget, they have consultation with civil society organizations that are working in the land space. When the Elections Commission is developing its budget, they will talk to civil society organizations because these CSOs also are part of the country. They are citizens, they are citizen groups. So that issue of participation is a bit limited. Open Budget Initiative wasn't addressing much of the issue of citizen participation. It was addressing the issue of transparency. Because when they had the Babos, you could see the amount that is allocated to JFK. You could see the amount that is allocated maybe to your hospital in your county. So that's just making it transparent for you to see. But they did not ask you before they put that number in there. Even that, it was limited because the Babo was only on Broad Street. The whole country cannot leave, everybody cannot leave from Maryland and Sano to come to Broad Street to come see those numbers flying from one point to the other. So I think participation is a bit of a problem that we need to address. But again, one thing I wanted to clarify is that the budget, with the way the public financial management law is written, the policy decision about the budget is made by the president. And it's not only in Liberia. This is why even in the US, you normally hear Biden's budget or you hear Trump's what? Budget. Because it is the president who, when he was running, had his priorities as to where they want to take the country from one point to the other. So that's why the PFM law is written that way, that it is the president that decides the policy direction. So like President Buhari has now decided that in my development agenda, I'm going to look at agricultural rules and all of that, rule of law. So when they are doing the budget, they also make sure that it's aligned to that national development plan, which is going for the next 5 years. So maybe we will have some time to discuss about the development of the budget itself before we get to the number. How does it work? Because when it gets to the parliament, you see the Minister of Finance delivering it to the speaker. But there are many months of work that go into developing that budget before it can come out.
But Tom, if the budget is law, right?
Yeah.
So if can we, and the president makes that policy decision as to what to prioritize, where the money to go. if the president promised us that I'm going to allocate this to this and I'm going to do this, if that is not done based on the budget, which is law, can we sue? I mean, if the kind of panel legal, how do we kind of hold the people or the government or the president accountable and take legal actions?
I haven't seen examples of those where you sue the president for maybe not including or meeting priorities in the budget, because it's not a 1 year process, right? So he could say today we didn't budget for this priority, but next year we are going to um, budget for it. So off my head, I haven't come across a case where citizens have sued their
Yeah,
government.
I just
Maybe
imagine.
except you want to have that precedent in Liberia. But again, like I was saying, I mean, just to summarize the process, the president provides the policy guidance and the policy direction. So what you see the Minister of Finance do in the PFM law, the president has the policy decision to make, but that power is granted to the Minister of Finance. So the Minister of Finance is actually working on behalf of the president when they develop that budget. He's not doing it for him by himself. Per the law, it is the president that's supposed to do the what? The policy decision, and then that can translate into the budget that the finance ministry develops. So the process normally, like I was saying, is that they start on the revenue side. So this is why if you look at the Ministry of Finance, they have different deputy ministers there. You have a deputy minister there that is responsible for economic management. You have a deputy minister there that is responsible for fiscal affairs, which has to do with taxation. You have administration. Now the Department of Controller and Accountant General is also now has been elevated. So the minister that is responsible for economic management, he's responsible for GDP forecasting. GDP is the gross domestic product, the value of the goods and services that we produce in a particular year. So they do all of that forecasting, working with the fiscal affairs department that come up with the revenue envelope. So if you follow quite recently, the Ministry of Finance is having revenue hearings. And what those revenue hearings are, they are calling entities that generate revenue to come for them to hear from them. Because even when you do the scientific forecast, you still need to talk to these people because they are the one collecting the resources. So quite recently, they had a hearing. You had the LTA there. You had other agencies there, security sector institutions. All of them would come. In the government, there are institutions that generate revenue. There are institutions that don't generate revenue. They only expend. So if you look at education ministry, for instance, what education ministry spends is not close to what they collect as revenue. So the Ministry of Education is not a revenue generating entity to an extent. The Ministry of Health, these are service delivery institutions. So what the Ministry of Finance will do is they will have the revenue hearing, and then they will have the expenditure hearing. Expenditure hearing is that they call you and say, this is how much we think we can get for you this year. How do you think you will spend it? And then you give your priorities and all of that. But before all of that process go into place, there's something they call the budget circular that the Ministry of Finance can release to inform the government that we are now going to start the development of the budget. Please submit your priorities to us. All those ministries will submit their priorities. When they submit the priorities, it can even be beyond $1 billion. But based on the revenue envelope, then the Ministry of Finance can cut everything down to say you wanted a budget of maybe 400 million this year, but we cannot give you 400 million. We can only give you what? Maybe 200 million or 300 million. So it is that kind of engagement that the Ministry of Finance will have with all of the government agencies on the expenditure side, on the revenue side. Then those priorities will now be put in the budget. And then the budget is not developed in isolation. You develop a budget to be able to help you achieve a priority that is laid out somewhere else. In our case, which is the National Development Plan. So when that budget is being developed, you are looking at agriculture is our first priority. How much money are we going to put there? Roads is in the AARD. How much money we are going to put there? So before now, there used to be a challenge of having the National Development Plan And then the budget that goes for 1 year, the national development plan goes for what? 5 years. The budget goes for 1 year. So in some instances, countries used to develop their national development plan, and then they just forget about it and come back to the annual budgeting year. So then the budget is now linked to your development plan, which is what you want to achieve after the 5 years. So to address that problem, this is how they introduced the issue of medium-term expenditure frameworks, MTEF budget. When you hear MTEF, MTEF. So when you look at the national budget now, like in 2025, we have 2025, which is the current year, and you will see allocations, projected allocations for 2026 and 2027. So that means in the AARD, there are only 2 out years. By the time we enter next year, 2026, we put those 2 out years to 2027 and 2028. When we enter 2027, we'll have already hit 2029 in the AARD because of the additional 2 out years. And those things are done for us to be aligned with that plan. So even though it's a 1-year budget, but you have 2 out years that are projected for you to remain focused on that national development plan. So we'll go back to your question now.
Yeah. Maybe Anthony have a question or something to say before you begin that.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, for providing that very insightful explanation for all of us to understand. So we get back to the $1 billion, how realistic it is, and I want to get my first question to you on that, Tom. In your estimation, what should be a realistic projection? I know the government target from the LRA, they have then on it that they want to raise $1 billion. What is your own realistic projection or expectation, knowing our economy the way you know it?
In other words, how much we need to solve the problem, so at least to a reasonable level, solve the problem that we are faced with? How much should be in that budget?
Well,
is that somehow building on your question, Anthony?
Well, you added another like to A, and I accept that. So I give the expert chance to speak to that.
So the one foundation I should lay here is that the budget can be any amount. So the 2026 budget, if we want it to be 1.2 billion, it can be 1.2 billion. Because like I said, the budget is just a piece of paper where they write numbers, right? But the point is, you don't want to have a budget that you cannot achieve. So that's where it comes back to the issue of a realistic budget.
Right.
But hitting that number is, we can hit it in the morning. Tomorrow morning, we want $2 billion budget. We can develop the budget for $2 billion. But what is the budget based on? And that's where we come to the revenue envelope. That budget is based on our domestic revenue. That means the money that we are collecting ourselves through our tax system, right? And in public finance, we have tax revenue and we have non-tax revenue. The tax revenue are the ones that are collected from taxes, like the personal income tax. When you work at the end of the month, the one that your employer can collect from your paycheck and remit it to the government. That's personal income tax. Then the other form of tax we collect in Liberia is called the GST, the Goods and Services Tax. That means when you go and buy t-shirt to all the Lebanese stores and Indian stores and all of that, you pay a tax on that, which is the Goods and Services Tax, which is where we want to transition now to value-added tax. Then businesses and companies in Liberia pay corporate income tax. That means when they do business, and then they subtract all of their costs and everything, the profit that they make. Because the point is, every income that you make, you need to pay small to the government. So all of those different taxes is part of our tax revenue. Then there are some other ones that are non-tax revenue. It's a revenue, but it's not a tax. Like when you go to get your license plate, you pay a fee for it. When you go to get your driving license, you pay a fee for it. When you go to the hospital, you pay a little fee. So those ones are non-tax revenue. So the budget is based on how much we collect in taxes, including the excise and everything we collect, import duties and everything, and then the non-tax revenue that we collect across the different ministries and agencies and commission, like the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. When you go for import RDPs, you have to pay a little money there. So all of that combined, where we are currently, last year, in 2024, the money that the LRA collected was 748 million. So we are around that 700 million. Even though the budget this year is 880 million, I think what the LRA is expected to collect is 804 million. So we are now from the 700, we are going into the 800. So that's why to do a realistic budget, you have to be around that 800, 8.5 or something. Because if you do 1.3 million or 1.3 billion, you might not be able to collect the money. And that's where the issue of the budget recast, you can hear budget shortfall. That means you have to recast the budget and bring it down. So in discussing when we can hit $1 billion budget, I think the focus should be when can we collect $1 billion revenue? Because once you get the revenue, you cannot have a revenue of 800 million and you do a budget of 600 million. What will you do with the other one? So how do we get our revenue to that point is where the challenge is. And that's where we need to focus on. But let me also mention that the budget is not only our revenue. We also get some resources externally. Some people give us grants, like the EU. Every year they'll come and say, we'll give you 20 million grant. But in many instances for the EU, it will be tied to budget triggers. That means you have to do this, then we give you this money. Maybe you engage with your citizens on decentralization, then we give you a little money. So even though our core, like this year, we are targeting that LRA can collect 804, but the budget is 880. So that means that difference there is coming from either international development partners or some other stakeholders that are providing resources to us. So I think let's focus on how do we get our domestic revenue to $1 billion? Because for the budget, like I said, we can get that number any day. If we are not going to reach it, we can recast it.
All right. And that's where we'll focus now. But you just mentioned something and it triggered a question in my mind. EU will give us this. Why will any of these bodies give us money? I mean, sometimes we're not part of them. Somebody just come to you and say, oh, Tom, I will just give you money. The only thing, take good care of your children, do this. I mean, what is their incentive?
So this is a question that goes into the whole issue of the aid architecture, right? So after World War II, developed the World Bank, IMF, and everything was developed, America had always been the champion of really leading this effort of, okay, developed countries, you have to give to developing countries. Because the point is that if you leave the rest of the other people so poor, disease might break out there, and then in the end, it will come to affect us, right? Then you see what is happening now with migration. Everyone is leaving Africa and crossing through the channel. The biggest issue in Great Britain, for instance, now is what? Migration. How do they control their borders? So one set of countries are rich, some other countries are poor. So there's this kind of altruism, right? Just even in you, Dennis, in your village, if you are the person that is rich in the village, every time the town is contributing maybe to fix the bridge, they expect that you will give a little more.
Yeah, because I'm part of the village. I'm part of the village, but somebody coming from outside and you're giving my village money, I'll be suspicious.
No. But the whole world is looked at as a single village, right? Anyway. So that's part of it that you have to give. The other thing is that there's something they call soft power. You want people to be aligned with you, maybe aligned with your culture.
Like you.
Yeah. So if you not drop small thing, you be talking, nobody will listen to you. Almost looking like when you be in the community. You just come from where you pass, you enter your house. Did they fire again on your house? None of the boys in the community will bring water there. So it's all built in the international system. And it has been something that has grown over the years. And it got to a point where even the developed countries were making commitments that at least, I think it's 0.7%. And only the UK had come close to that, but they have now started to call it down. They were saying we have to set a target to say, okay, 0.7% of our gross national income will go to what? Developing countries, or will go to what? Poor countries. Many years ago, the Africa, Asia, and some other regions even wanted to pass a resolution in the UN. They call it the right to development. That means we also have the right to develop like we are developed. Then the rich countries said, but we didn't have that resolution when we developed. Why do you need it? Development is something you work on and develop by yourself. So to answer your question, it's just that kind of, I mean, also it's tied to faith, right? Even in the Christian domination, in the Muslim domination, people give and all of that. And then to close that gap between developing and developed countries, and then that soft power. So that's why you see the EU will always give us money. When USAID was around, they gave us money. Sometimes it's the way we interact with them in global bodies like the UN and other places. So that's how, but aid is just part of the architecture, which is now being destroyed of late.
Right. And I mean, there's a whole discussion on it. Really, the intent is it to keep, I mean, like Great Britain, they don't have anything. The money they are giving back, they're taking it from, but that's another discussion. Let's go to the, and I like what you said that anytime we say budget, our concentration will be revenue. How do we raise more revenue? Because the budget to predict part, anybody can predict and say, okay, we'll make it 5 billion. So let's go to the revenue. How can we increase our revenue so that we can get to that $1 billion mark for our budget?
So there will have to be a lot of, we have to do a lot of work on different fronts. Like I said, I know there's a lot going on, a lot of initiatives that have been taken. We just need to reinforce those. The first thing I would say is that, and I've always said this when we talk about revenue generation in Liberia is, and even the current finance minister says it a lot, we have to grow the power first.
Yeah.
We have to grow the economy because the revenue we collect is a function of growth, or is a function of the what? Of the economy. The bigger the economy becomes, the more money you are able to what? To extract. Taxation is like you are extracting from the what? From the economy. When the economy contracts, that means it gets smaller, then the tax that you are collecting will get what? Smaller. So for instance, I was talking about personal income tax. People will have to work before you tax them, right? So that means the more you are growing the economy and more people are working, then you will be able to get additional or personal income tax. So the first thing we have to grow the economy. Right now, I think we are projected to grow by 5.6%, up from 4.8, I think 4.6 in 2023 or 2024.
And grow the economy means, you give one example, meaning more people get jobs. What other
Yes.
way we can grow the economy?
Growing the economy is like expanding the sectors. The agriculture sector, for instance. How does the agriculture sector produce more?
Right.
The agriculture sector by itself is not a good tax handle in public finance. When we say a tax handle is, what is this sector that we can use to be able to collect more taxes? Agriculture sector is not a good tax handle in the sense that in many instances, governments don't like to tax the agriculture sector because it's difficult. You have farmers all across the country. They are in different parts of the country. And then in many instances, they are not really out of poverty, like somebody making a cassava farm and all of that. So only the bigger ones like rubber farmers and other things, people you can be able to tax. So the agriculture sector is not a good tax handle. But if productivity increases in the agriculture sector, you can be able to get the tax on the sale of their product. Like people are producing more vegetables now, they are producing more rice. When that rice is sold, you can get the goods and services tax from on it, not merely from the farmers that are producing it. So when I say grow the economy, is to just make the economy to get what? Big. Like we are talking about tourism now. We open up the tourism sector. There are a bunch of hotels on the coast. Even Grand Crew now has some life that people can go there, people can move around. The more people move around, when they are going to the beaches, they have to rent vehicles. When they get there, they have to sleep in hotels, they have to buy food. Maybe we increase our manufacturing sector. We are now manufacturing a lot. Maybe let's say we got forests. Can we now start manufacturing furniture and exporting it out of the country? Growing the economy is just to make sure that there are more activities going on, that your production of whatever sector that you are in is bigger. And then once it grows, then you are able to extract taxes from it a little more. So the first point is we need to grow the economy a little more.
And just 30 seconds to add on that. So what does it take to do that?
So it takes a lot of resources to invest, and this is where the issue of taxation is very tricky, right? Because you also need money to be able to invest to grow the economy.
Right.
So this
Chicken
is
or
why,
egg? Which one come
yeah,
first?
yeah, chicken and egg. This is why what now we in taxation, it was almost in many instances, people look at it like, oh, government just want to collect money. But government needs that money to be able to grow the economy. So this is why sometimes you hear people talking about taxing for development, taxation for development. Let's collect the money and develop. So, for instance, I was talking about the tourism sector. You cannot do tourism without roads. So, for instance, we have the Sapo National Park in what? In Sino. People might want to go there to see all of the animals that are there. But if there is no road from Limba all the way to Sino, there's no road also from Grand Basso to Sino on the other side, then that whole asset you got there, which is a reserve that people need to go to, they cannot go there. So the government needs the resources to be able to what? To pave the road, to make sure the hotels are there and everything. So growing the economy also means collecting a little more taxes for you to be able to invest in the what? In growing the economy. The other one, the other side will come from is that it might not be like the taxes that you collect now, is to attract investment, which also has an implication on taxation. Because in many instances, when countries are attracting investment, and this is why we have a specific institution called the National Investment Commission, right? Their role and responsibility in the government is to go out there to be able to attract. That's what we call foreign direct investment. People who have resources out there for them to come to the country. But in many instances, when the people are coming to come and invest through FDI, they have their own preconditions. They say, okay, I will come, but you have to give me a tax waiver of what? 25 years. Maybe give me a tax break or allow me to import all of my machines and everything into the country. So what NIC does to be able to attract investment in the country, it does have implication on what the LRA will collect. If they give too much concession to just be able to attract the investment, then our tax revenue will come down, and that's where the tax expenditure can go up. So how do we balance that is something we need to pay attention to. I think this week the LRA signed an agreement, an MOU with the Liberia Special Economic Zone Authority, because the way these special economic zones are organized, they are basically islands where you give a lot of incentives to people to come and co-locate, yeah, and do business. But then when they come, they might not be paying the taxes, but they will increase your employment. If it works very well, they will increase your employment. They will increase your export and all of that. You get money from there. But the agreement that the LRA signed with the Special Economic Zone Authority is that these incentives will be based on output. If you employ this number of people, then you benefit from this incentive. If you produce at this level, you benefit from this incentive. And if that is not structured very well, even though you are attracting foreign direct investment to be able to grow the economy, but you will be reducing the revenue, the potential revenue that will come from there that the LRA is supposed to collect. So we grow the economy. Let's look at how much incentives we are giving, and the incentives that are on the table. Can we go and review them? The president, I think in Philadelphia, just said that all concessions in the country will be reviewed. Can we review those concessions and be able to take back some of those incentives that we gave? Because when we left from war, we were forced to give a lot of incentives. We never had water, no electricity, no road, and everything. So people basically, when they were coming, we had to be begging them to hold their food. But are we in the same situation 20 years down the road? If we are not, can we get some of those incentives back to be able to broaden our tax base? And in taxation, when we say the base is what is it that we are taxing? So once you remove some of those incentives, your tax revenue can what? Go up, especially from these big concessions and all of that. So grow the economy, look at our incentive regime, and then a lot of other things that we can also do on the policy side from the Ministry of Finance, and then improve the capacity of LRA to be able to improve tax administration. So I see Professor Kennedy.
Yeah, let me
I mean,
welcome
so let me,
Larry. Larry, welcome. We all knew him as Professor Larry Kennedy until after the PRC, he added Kuhn Kennedy. So now we say Professor Larry Kuhn Kennedy.
Dennis, if I had on red shoes, I'd take you to court right now.
Welcome, bro.
Yes, thanks so much, Mr. Kanye. I really appreciate you guys, man. I always like to be on focus on FOL, but my schedule will be so hectic sometimes. But I think this conversation is important because when you look at the situation Liberia finds herself in, after all these years, we don't seem to be moving up. But even if we're moving up, we're crawling. Whereas other countries that gained their independence, I think, what is it? I always talk about Botswana, they gained their independence. I don't know if it was this month or next month that they gained their independence in 1966. They're about to hit 60 years old, something like that. But look at that country. It took them 20 years before they became a middle income state. And another, 20 years or so after that, it became a high income state. But how did they do it? They did it with fiscal discipline. What we're seeing in Liberia 20 years after the Civil War, we're still chasing the IMF for ECF to enter the ECF program. And part of that has to do with a budget that is not realistic. Because when you set unrealistic budgets, what happens is you end up with a deficit. And when you end up with a deficit, you have to finance that deficit. So how do you pay for the deficit? You end up going back and borrowing more money. But all deficits are not bad. If you're using the deficit to invest in things like what Mr. Conner mentioned earlier, you're investing in things like roads that can lead to economic improvement. If you're investing in education, which is something that Lee Kuan Yew did over in Singapore to boost his economy. If you're investing in the healthcare system to make sure the life expectancy is a whole lot better. If you're investing in things like the internet, for example, because we know that internet access can bump up the GDP at least 1 to 2 percentage points. If you're investing in those things, then a budget deficit is not bad. But if you're taking the borrowed money to go and pay salaries, that's where you see Liberia finds herself, because when 89 to 90% of the budget goes to recurring expenditures, that means you're borrowing money just to go and spend on things that has absolutely no value or no wouldn't yield the sort of economic growth that you need. Because so think about this, if you're borrowing the money and you're spending it, it's like borrowing the money to go to the club. Well, there will come a time when you have to pay that loan. And when you don't pay that loan, what happens? People lose credibility. They don't want to invest in your economy. That's when you end up back again with the ECF program. And over the past, maybe 15, 20 years or so, Liberia has consistently gone back to the extended credit facility. But people don't seem to understand what this ECF does. I mean, I love the fact that my brothers are over at the Ministry of Finance. They're trying to do their best, but they shouldn't have celebrated Liberia entering the ECF, because there's nothing to celebrate. It only shows that your budget and your economy is struggling. If you enter the ECF, is like a payday loan in America. People with good credit, they don't go get payday loans in America, because payday loans in America have very high interest rate. And if for people who have very bad credit, Liberia has no credit rating. That's why they can't even raise the kind of money and capital they need, like other countries that have credit ratings in the ECOWAS region, like Ivory Coast and Ghana and things like that. Liberia has no credit rating. It starts with the budget. President Biden said, don't tell me what you're going to do. Show me your budget and I will tell you what you're going to do or what you made up. So when we look at our budget, it is made up of recurrent expenditures that does not lead to economic growth and development. We are fooling ourselves with this whole business of trying to get the budget to $1 billion. Why? If you get it to $1 billion, you're going to end up with a huge budget shortfall. Remember in 2023, I think we had one of the highest budget shortfall from the past 20 years. We had a budget shortfall of, I think, almost like 8% or so. Over the past 21 years, we only had, I think, 1 year where we may have had like a budget surplus. I think it was like 2013 or so. But every year we have budget shortfall. And that leads to us going to borrow more money to close the gap. So they shouldn't even consider getting up to that billion in the budget if you don't have, like what Mr. Conner mentioned earlier, a strategy to boost revenue. Focus first on at least showing you can have a revenue surplus. Then you say, okay, hey, last year we had a revenue surplus. Let's get the budget up there to match the revenue surplus from last year. That way we know we're not coming up with budget shortfalls. But this imaginary notion of trying to get to a budget of like 900 million or billion, it is bad economic practice, bad financial practice. And that's one of the results why we find ourselves after 170 something years.
But
We are.
Larry, let me ask you this, right? Because yes, the $1 billion and all that, but let's just concentrate on revenue. I heard you say that what we need to get to that $1 billion is start with fiscal discipline, right? So yes, we just got to get somewhere. So the question is, how do we get there? How do we get to $1 billion for the sake of this discussion, revenue? How do we get more revenue?
So here's one of the good things. I don't want to say because I'm not a big fan of the IMF loans, the IMF ECF, but here's one of the things about it. When the IMF, when President Weah came in and it entered the ECF program, I think President Weah entered the ECF program within 18 months or so of his administration. That's what led to the harmonization. Because when you enter those programs, they will force you to take some sort of an austerity measure. It is bad in a way because it'll stifle growth, but in a way it forces you to take action. So how do you do that? So in terms of revenue, there needs to be a grown-up conversation on cutting recurrent expenditures. Cut recurrent expenditures, take the budgetary money and invest it in those activities that will lead to economic growth. Take tourism, like Brother Conner mentioned. Invest that money into something that will drive tourism to go and see the waterfalls, to go and see the white rhinos and stuff in Africa, in Liberia. Put that money into investments that will lead to economic growth. But if you never cut your recurrent, look, I can guarantee, I haven't seen the fine print. I saw the IMF sent me the email when Liberia was approved for this ECF, but I haven't gone through it in details. But there will be something in there. There will be something in there that will lead to some level of austerity measure within the Liberian government. They're not just going to give you money and tell you business as usual. They will want you to do something to reduce your expenses. But to drive foreign direct investments to Liberia, you have to be able to make money available for people to invest. There has to be access to capital to start businesses. That's how you get the taxes to raise your revenue. There has to be economic activity.
Tom?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with Professor Kennedy. So just like I was saying, growth, like we both have said, we have to focus on growth. How then does the economy grow? It has to be targeted investment. And that's where now when you look at the public financial management space, what is really critical, especially on this continent, is public sector investment. How do you manage that public sector investment so that you get return on growth? You know, a lot of time when you listen to politicians say this and even ordinary citizens say this, like he was saying, the issue of contracting debt is not bad by itself. There is a concept that even says that it is unfair for a current generation to be able to pay taxes to develop a country and then the next generation just come and enjoy it. So that's why some of these loans are maybe 15 years, 16 years, 20 years, so that even the next generation Because if we pave the road to go to Lofa, for instance, with our own taxes, when our children come, it's already paved. That generation is just coming to enjoy the road. But if we take a loan, it's like it bridges that intergenerational contribution. So when we take loan, it's not bad. But the problem with the government of Liberia is we've not been able to pay attention to the public sector investment piece of what we do with public funds. Those resources, the projects that they are going into, do we have return on them? And the Ministry of Finance has not really done a good job over the past years with really being able to really scrutinize these public sector investment projects. Because if they cannot grow the economy, and we are borrowing and tax resources are going into there, so it's almost like a sunk cost. You just put the money there, it doesn't come out. It doesn't contribute back to the economy, and it does not generate additional revenue for us. So public sector investment, I think that's somewhere we need to pay a lot of attention. The other thing is that in revenue generation, normally when people talk about, oh, we need $1 billion budget, they just look at the LRA. There's a lot that the Ministry of Finance needs to do on the policy side. Look at our tax laws, look at the waivers that are in place. The LRA also needs to do a lot of work with improving the administration, and this is where technology comes in. So if you listen to the LRA, for instance, they were the first that started buying Starlink and all of that. They are using something they call electronic fiscal devices in big supermarkets and other things. It's a kind of machine that can track your sales so that you don't under-declare and pay less taxes. All of that is good, right? But the other side of revenue generation is how you spend the money itself, the one that you are collecting. Because in taxation, there's something they call tax compliance. In many developed countries, where they've gotten to is a level where citizens feel obligated to pay the tax. That means you don't have to run behind them for them to pay the tax. And the only way the citizens will feel that way is for them to see that the portion that they have paid is going into things that are benefiting them. If you invest in services that they are benefiting from, education, health, water and sanitation, electricity, that means that compliance will increase. Then everybody will pay their taxes. Then we are able to get to $1 billion.
Like the road fund.
Yes, then we are able to get to $1 billion faster. But when the citizens get up every morning, what they hear is that this other person has taken 40,000. The other person is corrupt. They arrested him and he ran away from the country. It doesn't motivate taxpayers to be able to pay what? Taxes. So we need to do a lot on that tax compliance side with really encouraging the citizens to be able to pay their taxes so that they themselves, even without the LRA going to close your business, can you pay the tax because you feel it's going to build a road for you? So raising domestic revenue has to be a business of the entire government. Even when you sit in a Ministry of Education, it has to be your business because the way you spend the taxpayer money, that's the way they will be encouraged to be able to pay. If we reduce the tax compliance gap, then tax revenue will go up. Then we have the whole issue of the informal sector. People are in places, they are hiding from the government cannot see them, the government is not able to tax them. How do we get to those people to be able to tax them? So there's a whole approach as to how you tax the informal sector. And one way we can be able to help with that is to implement the Local Government Act. Because the Local Government Act says that counties will collect property tax, they will collect business fees, business licenses, they will collect fees from professionals that are across the country. The LRA might not be able to see all of those people. But when we allow the counties to start collecting the little fees that are mentioned in the Local Government Act, we can then use that information that they collect at the county level across the entire country for LRA to be able to dive into it now to see if there's anybody that is hidden from us at the national level. Maybe the local governments will be able to collect you. And then the LRA can tax you appropriately. But it stays centralized. Even when the local government law was passed, it says that by 2027, counties should start collecting property taxes. I don't think we are going to meet that timeline. But if we do all of these things, it will increase our domestic revenue. And then we have the SOEs. How do we make sure they are efficient?
Before you get to the SOE, because that's another big area, I see things running through Larry's mind. And Larry, I know this because of my 35 years of teaching experience. So I want you to come in quickly.
Look, all right. So let's just say, we decide to get this budget to $1 billion. We know there's a risk of it having a budget deficit, but what can we do? It goes back to your initial question. What can we do? Let's say we want to change the dynamics of the country. Where should we put the extra money right now? So immediately I would start looking at agriculture, because agriculture is huge. You see, most of the times we're importing stuff from overseas. It's a shame, but it's happening. But when you start with agriculture, you immediately will start creating jobs, because you don't need a whole lot of technical skills to work on a farm. But not just any agriculture, you need mechanized farming to make that happen. So you need to be able to get the money to buy some machine, to get it over there to do mechanized farming. You need to set up light manufacturing. Now, it's not as complicated as one might think. This is even a better opportunity to do light manufacturing, especially in clothing. Why? Because with the tariffs that President Trump is using to hit China, this is where countries like Lesotho and other countries are taking advantage of the AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which I don't think President Trump, I don't even think he's going to renew it. But because Liberia has sort of a low tariff compared to what he's doing to the Asian countries like Thailand and China and so on, you can draw light manufacturing, clothing manufacturing. Some of the clothes that you see from the name brand, you go to Macy's and some of the other high-end department stores, those clothes are made in Rwanda. They're made in Kenya. They're made in Lesotho. Why? Because it's cheaper for these factories to set up shop over in Africa and pay less tariffs to get it done. So Liberia can attract those kind of things over there. But then people will say, but wait a second, we don't have the electric grid. Well, you have an abundance of sun, right? You have an abundance of sun. So you can even set up some of these light manufacturing using solar panels. How do you do it? Well, you can start educating the young people right now how to install solar panels. It doesn't take a whole lot of heavy lifting to start training people on how to install solar panels. You start setting up little light manufacturing with generators and solar panels. That will encourage people to start investing. But the low-hanging fruit, you have all this budget money. What is the low-hanging fruit? You have a huge diaspora that will be interested in vacationing in Liberia. You make sure your tourism is in place. People want to see the national parks. People want to be able to see the beaches. You'll be able to attract the diaspora back there if you put the infrastructure in place. But you need to track that stuff. Recently, I was telling someone that I know the person who actually sell the tracking information for the US government. And there are entities out there that can tell you who came from what country, what they did in that country, how long they stayed, and when they left. When I try to do a feasibility study with Dr. King, and Jones Williams, who's the city manager in Monrovia right now, it was difficult for us to find data to attract the number of tourists coming over to the country when we try to do a feasibility study. So you have to be able to set up a database to collect this information. Look, get into agriculture right away, mechanized farming, use the money for mechanized farming, train the young people in tourism. You can even get construction booming. You don't need a whole lot of technical skills to get into construction. But I'm telling you, if we don't stop paying legislators all of this money, giving them all of these benefits, and we keep putting our money to these recurring expenditures with scratch card and a whole lot of nonsense, you will end up in this cycle of the ECF. It's terrible. We don't seem to be moving. We seem to be in the same place. We might inch up a little bit, but then we go back and we take the ECF loan. And to Mr. Kanye's point, when they take these loans, Brother Kanye, they're borrowing it for a term of like 40 years. They were kicking the can down for the next generation, which is bad. Because if you're going to borrow, maybe pass a law that says for every borrowing you make, you have to make sure you make that payment during your administration so you can feel the pain. Because if you're borrowing and kicking the can down the road for the next person, people don't see it. People don't see it. So we have to be smart about these things, right? We can do it, but we have to be smart about it. And we have to focus on the people, training the young people. I keep saying this. We need a critical mass of highly technical young people trained in information technology, computer science, a whole lot of other stuff, because they'll be the ones that will get this country up and running. Right now, everybody want to be a politician because that's where people seem to make the money without any, You can go in there, you can be caught stealing, and nothing happens to you. So to close up on this, Dennis, none of this stuff would happen if you don't enforce the rule of law. Nobody's going to come to your country and invest if they know that you don't respect the rule of law. Because if something were to happen to the investment, there's no way for them to get that money back. So you're not going to get anywhere if you don't first have good governance, which is what Botswana did. By the time Botswana discovered diamonds in 1967, they had good governance in place. So they didn't get burned by this whole resource curse, this whole thing about the Dutch, I can't think of the name of it, but a resource curse. They didn't get burned with it.
That's disease.
Exactly. That's why you see Botswana where they are today, because it was the good governance that kept them in place. We need to fix this stuff. Liberia have the resources. It's so frustrating every day. You hear Liberia doing this, the same old strategy and expecting different results. It does not work. We need to change the way we do business, man. It's terrible.
Thank you. When you talk about diaspora and talk about the tourism, I mean, look at me. I've not even been to bombing. So every time I think about Liberia, it's like, how can I go on the other side? This place I want to go there and spend money, bombing, Cape Town, Bapolo, Lofa. You know, I'm from the other side. So those are the ones I saw. But Kanye was trying to get to, and there's more we can do with the diaspora. President Bouaka talked about reviewing the concessions, and Kanye, you mentioned that earlier. These concession agreements, why is it taking all this long to review them? You know, because all of the incentives and all those things that all of these big companies have, why is it taking all this long? You know, because we have all our team members here, small. Thursday is tough; it's a day of the week, so I understand. Thank you guys for coming. So that concession part, and Larry also talked about the tracking. You know, Cameron, you were talking about tracking something in the store. How do we even track what these big concession companies are taking out? How do we know the last time President Bouaka said, hey, look at come and do a survey and tell us what we got? Well, if you get 10 mineral, I'll tell you get 2. So how do we track even what these guys are making? This when we say, okay, give us 10%. 10% of what? Are you making $10? Are you making $100? Or are you making 1,000? So 10% in this set, even 50% in this set doesn't mean anything until we know 50% of what. So in reviewing, taking back incentives and doing all that, I want us to drill down in those things a little bit more.
So I think it goes back to the point Larry was making. Reviewing the concessions require capacity. You need top-notch lawyers. You need very good economists that understand. There's a feedback. Yeah, so you need lawyers, you need economists to be able to review these things. The issue with concessions in a country is that they are tied into this political web that makes it so difficult to be able to change even a clause. Some of the mistakes we made with some of the concessions is that there is no clause in some of the concessions for even a review. So you find it difficult to be able to review them. The country also gets so afraid that, oh, when you review this concession, maybe these other people are going to leave and all of that. We get so afraid. We don't do anything. Since I knew myself, almost every government that is coming to power says we are coming to review all of the concessions in this country, and they don't do it. In some instances, people just use it as a cover to be able to get money from these concessions. Because by the time they announce that they are coming to review them, they start having these meetings and all of that, which is difficult. But considering the situation that we are in with aid, ODI and some institutions are even now saying we are in a post-aid world. That means we are no longer going to go back to that USAID coming bring you from the American people and all of that. And the continent right now is talking about how do we get the best out of the natural resources that we have. So combining all of what is happening on the aid side with the focus on natural resources, I think it's a time to be able to review these concessions. Even Senator Coney has been raising this issue for the past couple of months. That Liberia is no longer what it used to be back in 2005 and 2006. So some of these commitments that we made, we can be able to remove them. That we have a fiscal challenge right now, we need money. So maybe if we're allowing you to bring your petroleum in free, can you now start to pay the duty? Or we can put these some clauses. Maybe it won't start now, but after 6 months or after 1 year, we are going to move to a new regime. And like I was saying, when we review all of these concessions, they are major actors in the economy. If we review them and drop some of these incentives, expand the tax base, we are able to get some money from there to be able to increase whatever domestic revenue that we have. But I'm just saying, since the president has said that this is going to happen at this point in time, let them do it. The challenge with concessions is that even the National Bureau of Concession that was set up to monitor these concessions, they don't do a good job. I don't know even if they have an SS spreadsheet that lists all of the concessions in the country, because we don't even know how many they are. Yeah. So I just hope they can really be able to move this forward and be able to do this work so that we can see exactly how much we can get from there. Because in the 2024, there was a study that was done. They call it the tax expenditure report. Tax expenditure is the money that you give away. So now governments track them. In between 2018 and 2021, 145 million. Even though it wasn't comprehensive, but that's why we lost through all of these holidays that we gave to these big companies and all of that. We need to review them. So I think that's something that the government really needs to deliver on.
Thank you. Let me bring in Mr. Attorney Freeman. And right after that, James, you can announce our calls in Liberia so they can call in. Attorney Freeman, we discussed a lot about how to raise our budget, or let's say to raise our revenue from where we are currently so that our budget can be around 1 billion. We talk about some of the ways and some of the challenges. Let me hear you. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I'll follow in the program, and I think the guys did a pretty good job covering a lot of bases. But I don't understand the emphasis on 1 billion. Is it the number sound nice, or why 1 billion? Why not 10 billion? Why not 500 million? Why 1 billion?
We've been hearing 1 billion, so we started from there.
But we gotta read 1 billion before we go to 10 billion. Why you want to jump?
Because my view is that the nominal figure is irrelevant. Whether 100 billion, 1 billion is irrelevant. What is relevant is the fiscal policy space. So,
and what is that fiscal policy going to do? Raise the money, right?
Oh, not necessarily.
Okay.
The fiscal policy space is going to give you that leverage of money that you have that you can use to your discretion.
Right. So at the end of the day, it's the same thing.
Yeah. No, it's a slightly different point I'm making.
Okay, let me let you.
Because if you make $1 billion, let's just assume you make $1 billion tomorrow morning, and 950 million of that billion is consumed in recurrent expenditure, you are still where you are. Mm-hmm. You have not moved, even though you reach 1 billion, but you have not moved.
Okay, so let me rephrase it. How to reach 1 billion and stay there?
No, it's not even that. It's not even that. Okay. It's how to reach 1 billion, but have a lot of leverage over how much money you can spend in the way that you want it, that is more geared toward productivity. I don't know if I'm explaining it not too correct.
No. I get the point you making. Is what you are saying is expenditure efficiency, and that's why I was saying
reaching 1 billion, 2 billion, 5 billion is not the most relevant thing. What is relevant is you must have sufficient discretionary funding so that if you have an economic policy, you can be able to put money into your policy. Let me break it down further, right? Because I'm saying to you, the rate at which we are spending on recurrent is around 90 to 95%, right?
Right.
So no matter how you increase your total revenue, if
your compulsory spending is in the 90 to 95% range, it means you will always be where you are. You have not moving. Yes. So
That's a different way of looking at it. You are right. It's just a different
what
way
is
of
important?
looking at the same thing.
What is important is to really scale back on the superfluous or the lavish spending, the excessive salary, all that thing. Then you give yourself space. That space is that, okay, now I have more money that are not committed. What can I do with this more money that are not committed? Okay, we always wanted technical education. Okay, so that's more money for technical education. Or we wanted to increase our industrial productivity, maybe for local businesses, stuff like that. So if you start thinking along those lines, then it means the real work is not so much on the revenue side, but it's on the control of the expenditure side, so that you can have money that you can now use strategically, because economic growth is a strategic interaction. It's not something you just don't think about. You have to think deeply about what is it that you want, where you want to be. There is no such thing as, like, on a 3-year planning, you have 3 to 5 to 10 years of sustained investment in the sector that you want to grow. Then you have the returns that you want. But if it's just, we want to reach 1 billion, you reach 1 billion and the government spend now 50 million, you still to 50 million, you have not done anything better.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, I think we discussed.
Yeah, we covered that.
Right, because like I was saying earlier, and this is where it affects tax compliance, because it does reduce tax morale. Tax morale is that pride that citizens get to be able to pay taxes. If you have countries that have high tax morale, tax compliance increases and tax revenue will go up. So that's why I was saying people in the government, in many instances, when they say let's raise domestic revenue, they just turn their eyes to LRA. That is what I was saying. No, it's not only LRA. Even you that are spending the money, you have a role to play, because the more efficiently you spend that money, the better people will pay taxes for us to be able to grow. But Mr. Freeman, the point is, even if we say expenditure efficiency is 100%, but we don't invest in the tax administration side to be able to collect a little more, we'll also be at that same point. The investment that goes on the expenditure side that is efficient enough, if we direct it to investment that grows the economy, you still will have to capacitate the LRA to go after that money and collect it before the revenue can go up. So it's not that we're not paying attention to the efficiency side. We're looking more at what are the strategies that we can be able to deploy to make sure that we go up. Not saying that we'll collect it and just use it the way we are using it. And Professor Kennedy was saying that with all these salaries that are paid, like the corruption that is taking place in the country, all of that does affect our ability to collect money from the citizens.
Thank you. James, if you can announce our numbers there so that we can get some calls from Morovia. And our numbers, if you are in the USA, we're going to put them on the screen quickly. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, the numbers to call are 0777 959 959 0777 959 959 0881 871 670 0777 959 959 0881 871 670 0881 871 670 0777 959 959 0777 959 959 are the numbers to call.
So I just got one or two more points I wanted to zero in on.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the other thing I want to emphasize is the issue of economic indigenization. So what it means is, generally, to what extent Liberians are dominant players in the economy. And if you follow the general pattern in Liberia, there is a big tendency to award government contracts to outsiders, foreigners. It is a big problem because it comes from like one government to the next. One government to the next, there is always this tendency of giving government contracts to outsiders, which I think is a very bad thing because at the end of the day, the government is a major actor. And if the government has a consistent policy of preferring Liberian business people, that is going to be a lot of help because all of that money and the profit could very easily get rolled over as opposed to foreigner taking the money out. The other point that we overlook is the monetary policy side of things. And that's, I'll come back to the dual currency policy issue. It limits our ability to intervene in the economy by way of monetary policy. So, and the fiscal policy is restricted by your revenue or collection, and is restricted by maybe how much loan you can get or how much grant you can get. Monetary policy has no real limit. You can go as much as the economy can absorb. So using a dual currency arrangement kind of limits your ability to intervene strategically in the economy, and so it limits what you can do. So those are things that have been totally abandoned, and they're not paying much attention to it, and it's limiting the ability to really raise the government revenue to the level that you should be better off for development.
A caller from the US. Go ahead, call out your name and where you're calling from.
Thank you very much, Dan. I really appreciate it. Yes, thank you. My name is Francis CEO, and I'm calling you from Charlotte, North Carolina. I listen to your program very often, and I'm always happy when I see Professor Lawrence on air because he brings a lot of fresh perspective to the discourse, and I'm really following because I'm a professional banker and here in Charlotte. But my question to you and all of the other panelists, when we speak of raising the national budget at $4 billion, I'd like to hear Professor Larry Kennedy's perspective relative to the real estate we have in Liberia. We don't have a lot of records for government to really collect taxes on real estate as we do here. So I'd like to know how can that area be really looked into to help raise the revenue above $1 billion, because too many homes in Liberia are folks and I'm paying the real estate taxes, and think about it, some of us who live here, the houses are just there. So I'd just like to hear your perspective as to how you think government can raise revenue when it comes to the collection of real estate property taxes. Thank you.
Thank you for calling, Francis.
Larry, you want me to take that?
Yeah, and I like Brother CEO for asking that question because this was one thing that the economist, I'm trying to think of his name right now, but he was trying to explain why capitalism tends to work over in the West and doesn't seem to work in other countries. And one way it tends to work in the West is the ability to use property to leverage to borrow against your property to use that to invest. So if you are an investor and you're interested in collecting rents and other things on your property in Liberia, there has to be an automated way of doing that. You have to streamline the system to get that done. And this is a great question because if you look at how the US did it by setting up, by being able to borrow money, by being able to provide some protection against default, right? We're in the digital age. We're in the digital age. I mean, look, here's the thing. The first wave of globalization saw factories leaving the US today. North Carolina, South Carolina, all those places down south had a lot of factories. The first wave of globalization saw all of those factories run over to Asia. The second wave of globalization saw some of the same factories in Asia now, because of the cost of cheap labor, moved over now to Africa. But what's happening with the third wave of globalization is because of information technology. Thankfully, all a young person would need in Liberia would just simply be internet access in a computer. You can digitize a lot of this stuff. You can absolutely digitize it, right? And I'm going to answer this by answering two questions at once. The Ministry of Finance, I would give them credit. I would give Gafuan, Depuzo, and some of the other folks over in the Ministry of Finance credit, because they're trying to change the dynamics of how Liberians are invested in the economy by allowing Liberians to now participate and bid on contracts that were initially being sent out to, whether it's Ghanaians or to people over in Asia, to win those contracts, but actually looking to get Liberians. So they're looking to see if there's a way to digitize the system. But the main part to what Brother CEO is asking, the main part, the rule of law. Because if people do not respect the rule of law, if people can get away with not satisfying debt, it would be extremely difficult for people to invest in our country, because there's a moral hazard. If I were to lend you money to go and invest in real estate in Liberia, there is the risk, number one, that you may not even use that money for real estate. You may go do something else, right? That's a moral hazard, right? But the way how you can avoid that from happening is if I can take a look at your credit report. We don't have a credit reporting system in the country. I don't know before somebody moves into your property here in America, you more likely will check their credit report.
Yeah.
So we don't know the credit worthiness of people in there because we don't track it. We don't have that kind of systems in place. When I was interested in setting up a system like that, and I reached out to the big three credit reporting agencies here in the US, they said the Liberian population wasn't large enough to be able to sustain or support something like that. But we can still come up with a way to do this, right? We can use technology to grow the Liberian economy, to make things a whole lot better, but you need a critical mass of technical people with the know-how. Brother CEO, you mentioned you're a banker, and I know I've been seeing you on social media, you're a banker. These are some of the folks who have seen, who've been to the promised land, who've seen how some of these systems work, that now the government should be reaching out to come back there and to share that knowledge and wealth on how to improve the system. But we need to be able to use technology to solve a lot of these problems. We need to be able to enforce the rule of law without a court system that respects property rights, that enforces the rule of law. It will be extremely difficult and risky to invest in our country.
Thank you. And Tom, before you come here, I want to add to that. How about land? Because private people are selling land in Liberia. So anytime you sell land, there's no tax on it.
There is. So I just wanted to add to what Larry was saying about property taxes. I mean, specific to the question he asked. Property taxes globally are collected by local governments. Property tax is actually the oldest form of taxation that has ever been collected. It started way back in Great Britain. And property tax is a good tax in the sense that, why do we do taxation? We don't only do taxation to be able to collect money. We do taxation for distribution purposes. We take money from those who are rich and then transfer it through our PFM system to those who are poor and those who cannot afford. That's why you can have free education and all of that. So property tax addresses that problem, because the quality of your house often reflects your ability or the income that you have. But also property taxes are paid to be able to help local governments to deliver services. So in taxation, there is a benefit principle. So because local governments in many instances are the one that deliver services, the local governments collect those taxes. In Liberia, the national government was collecting property tax until we passed the Local Government Act in 2018. And what the law said was that the national government will continue to collect the property taxes until 10 years after. And those 10 years were given for the LRA to be able to build the capacity of the county governments so that they could now start to collect property taxes. So in that law, the only part of Liberia that the national government has the authority to collect property taxes beyond 2027 is Monrovia, because the capital city was given to the national government. But property taxes should actually now be collected by local governments. But when you want to increase, like we're moving towards $1 billion property tax, yes, we can focus on it, we can collect it, but globally it's very small. Even in developed countries, they don't collect like 1.5% from property taxes. So it's actually a small portion of resource that we can depend on. We will be able to get money from there, but it won't be huge as compared to other forms of taxes. But that's something that we also need to focus on to be able to collect to add to whatever little we have. I saw quite recently the president passed, I think, asked all government officials to pay their property taxes. I don't know why we already have the Local Government Act that needs to be implemented and they are singling out government officials because in taxation, it's unfair for people who make the same income for one person to pay and the other people are not paying. So I think they should just go ahead and implement the Local Government Act. Then we address this issue of property taxation.
Thank you. James, can you announce the call again? Then after that,
let me say something real quick while he announced the number. Well, then you go ahead and announce the number. I'll say something real quick after that.
Yeah, the numbers again are 0777 959 959 0777 959 959 0881 871 670 0881 871 670 0777 959 959 0777 959 959 are the numbers to call. And let's hear from you on the program. Focus on Liberia, and this is Kear Radio 95.9.
So let me say this, Mr. Kane. So here's the thing. I think Brother CEO was asking that question because he understands the value that real estate tends to play in any economy, any economic growth. This is what Hernando de Soto, the economist, was saying, the mystery of capitalism. Because property taxes, I know on the East Coast here in New York, right? The amount that is collected from property taxes, it makes about, I think it's about 60 to 70% of the budget in New York City. We know real estate in New York City is like one of the highest in the world. So the property taxes collected in New York City, it makes up about 75% of that budget that they have. And I know in New Jersey, for example, in New Jersey, places like in Morristown, New Jersey, where a lot of the football players, the Philadelphia Eagles and all of these football players, they tend to have the big homes and stuff. New Jersey budget, I think about 40% of the total budget comes from property taxes. That's why the governor's race right now in New Jersey, it is focused on property taxes because it is considered extremely high in places like New Jersey. So collecting property taxes in Liberia would be a good source of revenue. But in order to do that, you have to fix the whole planning situation because there are people who have properties in areas where they shouldn't be. Yeah, if you think about it, there are places in Liberia where people just come and arbitrarily just seems to build or throw something up without it being fully planned. And I think this was probably one reason why in Ghana, all of those shacks that have been up since the Civil War, the Ghanaian government decided to tear all of that down and have the people relocated because Ghana understood the value of that property. So, but this stuff can actually be automated using technology. All of this stuff can be fixed using technology. You just need a very good database. You need some very good technical people to be able to do that. But this stuff will all be meaningless. It's all meaningless if you don't have the rule of law to enforce that stuff. And to go back real quick, well, to button another thing up real quick, how do you determine what budget amount? I know Brother Freeman was saying, but why stop at $1 billion, not at 200 million or 10 billion? Well, sometimes, I don't want to say it's a trial and error, but you need to have a strategy. By that, I mean, first, you would cap your recurrent expenditure. You can say, okay, number one, recurrent expenditure is not going to go over a certain amount. We can cap it. Right now, it's about 89 or 90%, which is extremely high. But let's say we cap it at around 75%. We know that in order to understand how certain systems function, we need to run a stress test, right? Brother CEO, you're in banking. You know the Fed. Yeah, the Fed runs a stress tests on banks periodically because they want to see at what point the bank will be able to meet its level of financing or be able to break. You can do the same thing within the government, but you need to be able to collect the data. And the problem is we don't have very good, reliable data in Liberia. So if we don't have the ability to collect data, we're relying on the IMF, the World Bank, USAID, which is now defunct, then we're not going to be able to draw a conclusion to draw the right answers because we lack data. So this is stuff that has been done in other places. That's why other countries are doing extremely well. The Seychelles, those guys are like way up there with Botswana doing extremely well. Why? Because they hire people based on meritocracy. And there's so many other things. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of stress that point in terms of the part that property taxes play over here in the US, why it is so huge. And that could also be a way to collect money in Liberia to boost up the budget. But if you're taking a budget scratch card, then you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
No. I mean, just 1 second, Dennis. The point I was making is that property taxes are very small composition of national revenue envelopes, but for local government, it's the biggest source of revenue. So, I mean, every city or every state you mentioned in the US, that's true. And it's a global, it cuts across every country. So besides the transfers that come from national government to local governments, if you look at all of the taxes they collect, property tax is always at the top. In some local government, it's 90% of their budget. But when you combine it with the overall national revenue envelope, it's often very small. This is why countries can just give it to local governments to collect it and deliver services. But the point you made is correct. For local government, it's a huge portion of their revenue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Lieutenant Fremont, let's say holding all things constant, meaning we are controlling our unsatiable appetite to spend the people's money. And we want to raise our revenue envelope, or we want to raise our budget to 1 billion, and let's use that magic number for now. How long you think it's going to take? Of course, should be incremental.
Well, it depends on your rate of growth in your income.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you recall, the last time we were on the show, we talked about drop in the revenue. So if your revenue is going up and coming down, when are you going to reach to your destination? It's like 1 step forward, 2 steps backward. If you're having maybe 5% growth, 7, 8% growth, 10% growth, and is year on year, because for you to really accelerate your economic projection, you have to have year on year of growth. If you're going to have 1 year positive, the next year negative, 1 year positive, the next year negative, you're not going to reach your destination anytime soon. Mm-hmm. So at this point, I can't really predict how long it's going to take, but the trend in the growth in the revenue has to be consistent. Like, for example, if you're having an annual 8% growth in your revenue, and that annual 8% stays that way, and you compound it, meaning you do it this year, 8%, you do it next year, 8%, it starts to compound. You reach your destination much faster. So I don't know if that answers the question. So at this point, I can't really predict, because I feel like our revenue has had a spotted trend in terms of growth. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has been like some day budget shuffle, some day okay, budget shuffle. If you keep going back and forth, you won't get to your destination soon.
No, Dennis,
Brother, kind of 1 second. What Brother Freeman is saying is so true. What Brother Freeman is saying, and let me explain this real quick, because I've been saying this a lot. I'm sure a lot of people have heard me say it. What Brother Freeman is saying is so true. But the problem in Liberia, it would be rare. I know that I have projections like 5 years, so it would be rare that you would be able to have consistency in growth beyond 3 years. Why? Because look at the data. Look at the data. Back in 2006, after Madam Sirleaf came in, what happened? Immediately by August of 2007, the U.S. got hit with a financial crisis. We saw the big banks failing, right? We saw Lehman Brothers, a huge investment bank that no one thought was ever going to fail. They failed. But there's a saying that when the U.S. economy sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. That led to a global financial meltdown, and we had crisis across the entire globe, right? Very few countries actually got hit. So what happens? The financial crisis ran up until 2009, 2010. But by the time we came out of the global financial crisis, by December of 2013, what happened? We got hit by Ebola, right? So Ebola, a young kid down there over in Guinea, unknown this disease that had been since 1976 over in the Congo, that even back in the 60s came from Marburg in Germany that had the same hemorrhagic fever. By 2013, it hit Liberia. We had Ebola stretch until 2015, 2016. By the time we came out of Ebola, so imagine, here's your economy now. You're looking for consistency in your growth, but it never seems to happen in Liberia beyond 3 years. Because by the time you came out of Ebola, what happened? By March of 2020, you got hit with COVID. So your economy stalled again. That's why you don't see consistency in the growth rate with Liberia. Because by the time Liberia emerged out of COVID, what happened? We see this war breaking out between Ukraine and Russia, and no one paid attention that Ukraine was actually responsible, between Ukraine and Russia, they're actually responsible for supplying almost 30% of the green and fertilizer out there. So then again, we suffer from that. And then by the time we look, okay, things are starting to ease. We've already put in some mechanism to deal with that stuff. What happened? Liberia is so aid dependent. President Trump comes in and he snatches USAID away. So then again, almost $500 million pulls out of the economy again. So Brother Freeman, if you look at the data since 2006, there hasn't been consistency in growth in the revenue over 3 years. It has not happened. It has not happened. So then what do you do now to make sure you don't end up with this budget shortfall? That's why we only have one budget surplus in 2013, I believe, right before Ebola hit. Yes, in 2013. But over the period of what? Over 10 plus years, this always has been budget shortfall. Why? Because we make these wild predictions of like 5 years or so that never happens. Never ever happens. So Brother Freeman, you're right. If you look at the data, you want to see consistency in growth of 8%. It's just not going to happen.
Thank you. And Tom, I want to think of the best case scenario. I know with the current trend, Larry and Freeman can say that, but if the things that we say should be put in place are put in place, how long will it take us?
3 years.
Yeah. I wanted to come back to this point, right? Where we have had the up and downs is on the budget side.
Not revenue.
Where we have, the revenue, even in 2021 when COVID came, the 2021 revenue was above 2020. So LRA was created in 2014. We have had a gradual increase in revenue. When Madam Sali was there, when she was leading around 2017, we're around 400 million, 500 million. Now we are around 700 million. So where the fluctuation is normally is as a result of the shock, because everything that they are discussing is economic shock. It's either in the form of a financial crisis or in the form of a health crisis. So those ones hit the economy, but on the revenue side, we haven't had, except for 1 or 2 years, we go up in revenue and then we fall below that. This is why for me, every year I even see people celebrating LRA to say, oh, LRA collected more revenue this year than last year. Once the economy is growing and we are moving gradually and there is no shock, we should expect that. Because today the economy is around 4.7 in terms of GDP. A couple of years ago, it was 4 billion. So we don't expect to collect more revenue last year than this year. So I agree with the points that they raised, but these are mostly in the form of what? Economic shock. And even during these shocks, like during the COVID, LRA tried to digitize quickly so that we could be able to collect revenue. So the revenues have not been that, they haven't fluctuated that much. There's a general upward trend in terms of the revenue. But whatever projection that you make as to where we think we can get there, you have to take into consideration what they are saying. Because you could say that we'll get there in the next 2-3 years, and then when there's a crisis, we'll go back and start from square one. So for me, I think if everything continues the way it is going, with the investments that are going into roads, with the investment that are going into electricity, the economy tries to expand over the next 2-3 years, I think before 28, 29, or 30, we should be able to hit this. And not on the budget side, like I said from the beginning, not for the budget to be $1 billion, but for us to be able to push the domestic revenue either to $1 billion or close to $1 billion. Because if the LRA gets to the $804 million this year, which is the target that they are running after, and quite recently, Double Jala at the press conference at at NICAD, he said they've collected 70%, I think 540 some more. So they are left with around 240 some more million to be able to get to that 804. So that means we have hit 800. We are left with 200 million. If you look at what is happening this year, they are signing all of these oil concessions and production sharing contracts that are bringing some signature bonuses, 15 million, 12 million, and all of that. They just signed this agreement with Ivanhoe. We don't know exactly when that is going to start. So there are new revenue streams that are coming in. But the issue of these production sharing contracts, these signature bonuses, is that they might carry your revenue up this year, but they are one-time revenue because you don't sign the contracts every year. So I'm really thinking that 2026 budget should be anywhere in the tune of maybe 900 million. And then in the next 1 or 2 years, we should be able to really get close to that point. And with the work that the LRA is doing to really be able to deploy technology, which is what all the countries on the continent are doing now, use technology for tax collection, and they can be able to address these concession issues we discussed, implement the Local Government Act to broaden the tax base on property taxes, on the local government fees and all of that, pay attention to SOEs, get what they can get from them. I think 3 to 4 years, we should be able to put this behind us.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. We are almost out of time, so we're going to go to our closing comments. And James, no call?
No, not yet.
Complex
Not yet.
topics, not political, more technical. People sometimes just listen,
Yeah, and that's good. Go ahead.
Nobody can be called when you're talking about medium-term expenditure framework.
Yeah, that's the same thing I was talking about, right?
They do follow it, but they don't feel confident to join the conversation.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
like what I was saying, a lot of people are not educated about these things. So sometimes when these discussions come up, they don't call, they decide how to participate because what are they going to say, or what are they, what would they be saying or suggesting? Because some of the terminologies they're using, they don't understand. So we need more education in our budget and how people, Liberians can participate to make it their own instead of lawmakers just going to decide, come back and they say, oh, let the budget is being passed. This is 800 million and that.
So how do we get the education now if they don't tune in? But anyway.
No, they're tuning in, but they're not calling.
They're listening.
Oh, okay. Good. Let's conclude.
Okay, so I'll re-echo my points that the real issue is how much fiscal policy space can you get? How much money, pot of money can you have that you have much more discretion over? So it's not that much about the $1 billion or $2 billion, because that money can increase and the government expenditure can increase right along with it, and poverty will still remain. So the key focus is if you have a bigger fiscal policy space, you can be able to intervene in the economy strategically to solve some problems. The other thing I want to emphasize is the issue of industrial productivity. We have to make stuff. We have to produce stuff. You cannot survive almost on 100% importing goods from abroad. But in order to do it, a lot of the countries that did it in the past, they require a proactive government expenditure for local businesses, Liberian-owned businesses. Because with Liberian-owned businesses being highly promoted and given preferences, the profit gets reinvested Do you know that in Liberia for a long while, like for example, we had Lebanese dominating our economy. The only thing they did was to build a store downstairs and build an apartment upstairs. And the rest of the money was shipped to Lebanon. There is no incentive. But if that were a Liberian entrepreneur or business person, they will plow back their profit into the economy. And we take it for granted. CDC come to power, they kind of gave a lot of contract out to foreigners. The other people criticize them and come and they give a lot of contract out to foreigners. We have to find a way to systematically promote Liberian-owned businesses. That way we can do it. I also mentioned the issue of monetary policy. I feel that this dual currency policy is not good because it restricts the government ability to improve the economy through monetary policy. And as a government, there are two ways to help your country. You can go by way of fiscal policy, or you can go by way of monetary policy. Those are two major planks in improving your economy. If you limit yourself to only fiscal policy, and like we are discussing now, is restricted to your revenue collection, is restricted to your grants that you can get, is restricted to the loan that you can get. So anything outside of that, you can do anything much on the side of fiscal policy. But now, if you hamstring yourself on the monetary policy side, but continue with the dual currency policy, the central bank, the way other central banks are able to intervene in the economy and do a lot of stuff that will help the economy to grow, they will not be able to do it because they are operating with a currency that they don't have a lot of control over. So I want to stop on that. I think the other guys did a lot of a great job or explaining the other points, but those are areas that I want to chip in on.
Thank you. Tom, you're closing.
Very good show. I think we should, if we are going to solve the problem of taxation, budget, and all of that, we need to talk about it a little more and bring everyone on board. But I think the Ministry of Finance and all of these agencies really need to do a lot on participatory budgeting, because, like I said, if the people are involved in deciding how their resources are used and is going towards the needs that they have, then they will be able to pay the taxes. So participatory budgeting does not only help with making sure that citizens can participate in allocating their resources, but it also help on the tax side. So just to let me go over the points that we discussed. The bigger question was, how do we get our domestic revenue to a billion? Because like I said, for the budget, we can get there tomorrow morning. Anytime we want to get that budget to a billion, we can get it there, but we will be realistic. Is the situation that we face. So like we said from the beginning, we have to do everything to grow the economy, because taxes are a function of growth. The bigger the economy, the faster it is growing, we will be able to collect more taxes. One of the things that we didn't mention on this show is the issue of urbanization. And in my conclusion, let me put it there. It ties into property taxation. Today, cities are seen more as drivers of growth. Because even if you look at Liberia, where is the most wealth created? Where are the most services demanded and all of that is happening in the growth corridors, which is the urban centers. Outside the mining, it's in Monrovia, maybe Buchanan, Ganta, and other places. How do we then use urbanization and urban planning to make sure that our cities are built in such a way that they are able to deliver services to our people? It's something that is very critical. And I think we need to pay attention. In many instances, the Department of Urban that is at the Ministry of Internal Affairs is not doing a great job. And it will not do a great job until the president will appoint people who have a background in urban issues to go to that department. Grow the economy, improve urbanization. The Ministry of Finance needs to do its piece on the tax policy side. Many countries today, when they write domestic resource mobilization strategies. It used to be 1 year, 2 year. Today we call it medium term DRM strategies. There is a clarity on how much revenue will come from changes on the tax policy side, and then how much revenue will come from the changes or the progress that the tax administration will do. And to distinguish that, what the Ministry of Finance does is on the tax policy side. What the LRA does is on the tax administration side. So in our domestic resource mobilization strategy from 2025 to 2030, we say we want to increase our tax to GDP ratio from 12% to 16%. But it's not very clear what is the Ministry of Finance going to contribute to that additional 4% increase, and what is expected from the LRA. I think these are things we need to pay attention to. We also need to capacitate the LRA. If you listen to the Commissioner General, he's always talking about more resources. They just had the West Africa Tax Administration Forum in Freetown. All of these tax administration, all of these tax authorities that were there were advocating for more resources. I think in the current LRA Act, they take 2% of whatever they collect. We need to give them more resources so that they can use technology to be able to move forward. I mentioned the SOEs. We need to rein them in, collect more from them. But it's not only collecting the revenue from them, we need to reform them so that their corporate governance can be better off. That way they are able to contribute to us. Fully implement the Local Government Act, capacitate the counties to collect what they need to collect, improve the rule of law. Larry said that. And also the other thing we didn't discuss, but which will contribute to domestic resource mobilization, is the issue of this diaspora bond. They said they are going to start issuing. I'm not very clear who will issue it. I think the Minister of Finance said it will be the central bank. In some other countries, it's issued by the Ministry of Finance, because it's like you are contracting debt. But it also has to do with the capital market, which is what the central bank prevails over. So these are all areas that we can tap into to be able to increase this domestic revenue. We mentioned tourism. We have an authority now. How do they move fast for us to be able to move forward? There's a lot that is going on, but there's a lot more that we can do to be able to push this domestic revenue from hopefully 800 million to maybe $1 billion in the next 2 to 3 years. If there is no shock, a very big shock to the economy.
Okay, thank you. Kafuma said we shouldn't just highlight the problem on the platform without suggesting solution. The entire show is about solution, how to raise 1 billion. And then Kafuma, I don't know why you're listening. But James, let's wrap it up.
All these Unity Party people, they have the Unity Party show, how they call them, or Class Reloaded. That's where they do the praise and worship. Okay, this is an independent, we come here to give technical opinion. Nobody come here to worship anybody. You go to Class Reloaded, you will hear from beginning to end, oh, the government is doing very well. Everything is okay. We'll raise $2 billion. That's where you will get that from.
Yeah, so I'd like to thank our panelists again today for this very insightful and thought-provocative, discussion. Like he said, it's strictly technical based, and you do not have many people listening to these kind of conversations in our country nowadays. I hope that those who have listened, they have grabbed the concept and they are learning. They have learned new things about our budget, our economy, and how can we increase our budget to $1 billion, not just for the future, but also looking at the technical responsibility, technical aspects, and how our government can improve our revenue generation, all those kind of things. So thanks to you again and our listener. Thank you so much for being there. We hope to join you next time on the program.
Join me tomorrow night for Friday night debate. Until then, we close with a song that says, "We are all Liberians." Have a good night and God bless.
We are Liberia. Liberia is our home. Liberia people. Liberia.